It says you're live. Perfect. Good evening, everyone. My name is Simon Misiewicz, and I am from the Property Experts panel, along with my other panel members. We wish to say good evening to you all, and hopefully you can get onto the live session with us. So I can see a couple of you joining us now. So before we get underway with your questions and as answering in the best way possible, I wish to just kind of introduce everyone to into the panel members, just to give a brief introduction to themselves, what they do in area of expertise, and how they're going to help you again tonight. So let us start with Bronwyn. Over to you.
Wonderful. It's great to be here tonight and with all my wonderful experts. I can't believe we're in September, so we've lost count now how many of these we've done, probably 8. So it's wonderful to be here. My name's Bronwyn Burncombe. I'm a property investor down in Hampshire, Southampton, Portsmouth, Winchester. I have a portfolio of HMOs, holiday lets, guest houses, a development. But the main thing I'm here about is to help people learn. And this is how to learn, is to work with experts, to actually ask questions. And I have an online program of learning. So if you're just starting out and you're a little bit confused about the various strategies out there, book a chat with me, have a look at my website, Property Investing Foundation. All the contact details will be in the YouTube area after the call. So more than happy to chat to people about how I can help you learn. I have a book as well. I don't know whether you can see that because the video won't allow it. There we go. Building Your Dream Life. So looking forward to answering your questions with the panel. Thank you. Next, over to Jenny.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jenny. Am I live? Yeah. My name is Jenny. I'm also from Hampshire. My primary work is as a letting agent, but I'm also a portfolio landlord. Been doing that for best part of 20 years now. And I'm here tonight to help with any questions on the lettings front.
Who's next? Paul.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's expert panel Q&A session. My name is Paul Hilliard. I'm also a portfolio landlord with family lets, HMOs, service accommodation, but I'm also the operations director of LNPG, the Landlords National Purchasing Group. So if your landlord business costs are going up and up and up through the roof and not in proportion to your income rental, then please do bear us in mind, because some landlords are fortunate enough to have saved thousands on their refurbs and buying at B&V prices. So yes, B&V kitchens, B&V bathrooms, B&V boilers, B&V windows, doors, tiles, bricks, everything you need for a refurb. Just come and talk to us. I'm able to help all landlords with large and small portfolios, whether you've got 1 property or 100. And we make a serious difference to your purchasing costs. So what's easier for you? To allow your spending to continue to spiral uncontrolled, or become a member of the UK's largest discount club for landlords and save thousands on your refurbs and insurance. So don't forget, and I'm also based in the West Midlands, if you couldn't tell from the accent. So over to you, Simon Hodgson.
Thanks, Paul. Historically, I always talk too much. I'm going to try and keep it brief tonight, okay? Yeah, exactly, Simon. You wouldn't believe it, would you? So I'm a whole of market mortgage broker, directly authorised by the FCA. I've been involved in property since the early noughties. And I started out back then speaking to a residential broker who knew nothing about buy-to-let mortgages and effectively taught him about buy-to-let mortgages. And he then arranged those mortgages for me. And I kind of went on from there to do broking myself, and that's kind of what I do now. I'm a property investor. I've been buying, selling, converting flats, title splits, etc., through all that period of time. And I've done extensively a number of property investing courses back in 2009, etc. Yeah, really the reason I'm here tonight is to answer mortgage questions and strategy questions that you might be thinking about, and to help new people to the marketplace get investing really and get funding. over to, who should we go? Teresa, here we go.
Thank you very much, Simon. Yes, hi everyone. My name is Teresa Kaczmarek. Really pleased to be here this evening. I'm representing the National Residential Landlord Association, which I think we've got over 85,000 member landlords with us currently, and that's growing week by week, as well as providing, advice and services to help landlords start tenancies, manage tenancies, and end tenancies. We also lobby government on behalf of landlords as well. I am a HMO landlord as well, so I have, experience in that area. But I've been working for the NRLA now for about 5 years. And tonight I just wanted to bring up, because I know there's quite a few investors who listen to this this webinar, and just want to say that the NRLA do have a research hub. So we're constantly pulling data together, which is potentially, useful for investors. So, for example, showing the growth in the private sector, what the lending statistics are, what the rent levels are, rent growth, things like that, which are useful. But this evening, I wanted just to highlight one question in the landlord confidence index that we have. So we're asking landlords, were they more or less confident about achieving their goals? Can you hopefully understand my accent? Goals now compared to how you felt in the last quarter. So we have here 35.5% of landlords feeling less confident about achieving their goals, and 42.6 with no change, so feeling pretty much the same. And those figures do drill down into the different areas so that you can see which landlords are feeling confident, which landlords are not feeling confident. So yeah, I just thought I'd throw that one into the bag, and yeah, look forward to answering some of your questions this evening. And over to who hasn't spoken yet. I don't know.
Tim.
Tim.
Last and probably least. Hello, everyone. My name's Tim Bishop. I'm a solicitor and I own a law firm called Banalek & Bishop. We're a medium-sized law firm. I've got about 65 staff, but a lot of our work is property related. And within that, we have a property investor team, and we also have a specialist team doing nothing but lease extensions and enfranchisements. We also always offer free initial phone advice to any property investor. So if you've got a problem, it may be a simple question of putting your mind at rest with a 2-minute phone call. So give us a call and we'll see if we can sort that for you. As well as being a solicitor, I'm also a landlord myself. I've committed commercial conversion, and my portfolio includes HMO, ordinary buy-to-let, and SA. And finally, one other thing I'd like to mention, I think these sessions are fabulous, these Zoom sessions, but the one thing I really miss is actually the personal networking, because obviously we talk to you, we answer your questions, but there isn't the networking. So myself and a guy called John Corey from Property Fortress have set up what I think is currently the only pure online networking. So all it is networking. There's nothing like this because this does it brilliantly, but we do the opposite, which is purely property investors online networking. We do it 4 times a month on the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of every month at 11 and 7, and the next one is this Wednesday. So if you're interested, please do get in touch with me by phone or by email, and I'll let you have the booking details. It would be nice to meet you personally, one-to-one on Zoom. Thank you.
Thanks
over
for that,
to Simon, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Tim, just also, would you mind sending me the URL details for that event, so at least we can then share that with the description as well. So if people
Certainly
do,
will.
In fact, if you put that through the chat box, if you do have that to hand, I can put that through the YouTube search as well. For anyone listening to Tim, he is currently travelling on an airplane descending into the UK as you speak, talking through his microphone. So if you can kind of hear that in his microphone, that's what it is. He is an actual pilot. It's nice to see as well Simon Hodgson, who is hitting the bottle nice and early tonight with his gin and tonic. So there's some great questions for mortgages. I've siphoned them all out, so we will start to tackle those mortgage questions. And also, if you hear a voice but you don't see the person, that's because Paul Hilliard has bought a below market value microphone and webcam, so you will start to see him disappear. That's because of the below market value price. So in regards to the first question, it always leads with the tax questions. Should I start with a limited company? What's my tax structure, etc.? And I always kind of slopey shoulder with this one, but I will hit it head on directly. Anyone that's thinking about incorporating their property portfolios, the one thing I won't be able to say is give you a specific answer to your case. But I know that Bronwyn, and we'll maybe hit onto you for a second on the incorporation process. But I do suggest that you do take your time to understand, should you incorporate into a limited company? I'm seeing an awful lot of marketing by accountants who've got bigger marketing budgets than I clearly have, who's basically said, if you do not use a limited company, then the world will end tomorrow. So please, all of you, use a limited company, because without it, we all will go into despair, clearly. In reality, though, that's not the case. Okay, so you do need to ensure that you use a limited company, and it is really going to save you tax in the long term. People use a limited company or think about incorporating in their property portfolio only to realize that actually they're in property to give up their job. And if you're going to give up your job as a property investor, you are likely to be returning to be a basic rate taxpayer anyway. So you may be shooting yourself in the foot by putting everything into a company structure and long-term, not actually saving yourself any tax whatsoever. So do think about the long-term picture. And there is an acronym I always use for limited companies, and especially when questions that come out, is FOMO. I think as humans, we tend to have FOMO. For anyone listening who was wondering, what the heck is FOMO? It's basically the fear of missing out. So it's like shiny penny that someone talks about on Facebook and say, oh, I must get myself one of those. It's not a set of curling tongs, which Paul Hilliard had to use a couple of months ago. Oh, no. These are genuine tax structures that you need to use. And it's very costly if you get it wrong. So Bronwyn, over to you, because obviously you went through the incorporation process. And I appreciate it was never going to be the easiest process. But would you mind sharing with everyone, talking about the incorporation process?
Absolutely. Before I do that, though, you know, the myth of you must have a limited company, you know, I see it so often in social media. And quite often people come to me and say, I'm looking to learn about property, but I know I've got to have a limited company. So I went and opened one. And I'm like, no, because your situation is so different to somebody else's. Just because someone else has a limited company doesn't mean to say it's the right thing for you. Anyway, back to my situation. So when I started in property 7 years ago, I bought a number of properties in joint names with my husband. I didn't have a limited company. Section 24 wasn't really impacting at that point. So then all the tax changes came in. And so I then set up a limited company. And because I was continuing to grow my business, then it was important for me. Anyway, long story short, those ones that I bought in joint names, it made sense now to incorporate those into the rest of my business. And yes, it was a process, but I went to, guess what? The experts. So Simon here and Cornerstone, fantastic service. Yes, it cost me some money, but it didn't cost me the stamp duty, the capital gains and all those other things, because we've been in business in property since the beginning. So when we were buying those properties, we were in property as an investor. So we're seen as a partnership. So it was a lot easier. It wasn't like it was completely separate business and we're bringing another business in. So it isn't difficult. Just go to the experts and be prepared that it is going to cost you some money, because, you know, there's quite a lot of legal processes to go through. But yeah, we did it. We did it within, must have been about 3 months, I think. Not too bad. Yeah, so we're now all limited. So that's nice.
And just to go on the point, obviously, if you're thinking about incorporating your property portfolio, you may not even be at that advanced stage of incorporating, but you're thinking, should I buy a property inside of a limited company or keep it to my own personal name? And one of the things that you may be thinking about is taxation savings. But if I'm going to bring Simon Hudson, if you could put your gin and tonic down for a minute, mate, that'd be great. In regards to the mortgage interest rates, whether that's in your own name or a limited company, just tell us what's been on the rates profile recently.
Right. Okay. As ever, and the gap did widen through the coronavirus lockdown period and has remained as wide as it was previously. So if you're buying in your own name and it's a single let property, okay, then there are interest rates, plenty of interest rates in the ones available. 75% loan to value, somewhere in the ones, depending on whether you're going for a 2-year fixed, a 5-year fixed, and what fees you pay. It might be a no fee that tips into 2%. Contrast that with buying the same property in a limited company, and the interest rates are currently going to sit somewhere in the early 3s to late 3s. So it's more than double. So there's a massive saving, massive, which is really worthwhile taking on board. However, that flips a little bit if you're buying an HMO. If you're buying an HMO where you're multi-letting the rooms out, a genuine HMO mortgage, whether it's in your own name or a limited company, is going to be in those 3%, from around about 3.25 up to the late 3s, 3.99. So there's no difference whether you're buying your own name or a limited company for a more complex property deal. So there's a real dichotomy there where you can plan your strategy and potentially work with Simon, speak about tax, because he loves to talk about tax, believe it or not, and put single lets into your own name, yeah, and really utilize the better interest rates and the tax perspective that might well come from that strategy, and then put the more complex properties that are going to pay higher interest rates anyway into the limited company because the savings aren't as great. That might be a really good way to strategize it, I would suggest.
Mm. And let's just take us off the beaten track about tax structures, because I think you're right, Simon. I do like to talk about tax, not as much as listening to you talk about mortgages, to be honest. I can't wait until you can talk about the next mortgage product.
Fact.
But that aside, I think let's talk about what's happening in the world of property rights now. And we're coming obviously out of COVID-19 coronavirus, but we may be going back into it. Teresa and Jenny, from your perspective, what are you seeing we talked about confidence levels, but what kind of things are going out there with landlords in terms of getting new tenants in, and are tenants happy to move into properties, or are they a little bit fearful? Let's go with you, Jenny, and then Teresa, if you could follow up that from the NRLA feedback.
Well, certainly locally to us, we are finding a very, very active rental market, provided it's very price sensitive. Prices are right. We're letting rooms, and people are very happy to move. There doesn't seem to be a problem with worried about the coronavirus issues of moving into a shared house. I did move somebody in the other day who actually asked the question, what should I be doing in a shared house? But most people don't even ask the question. The answer, by the way, was you need to be respectful of other people, give each other space in the communal areas, and predominantly stay in your rooms, because these are people that don't know each other. They're living in a shared house and they've all got their own work agendas, etc. From a point of view of lettings, it's buoyant. I would say it's buoyant, probably because there was pent up demand because of people not being able to move during lockdown. There does not seem to be any concern, as far as I can see, about the coronavirus issue with people wanting to move property right now. But it is price sensitive.
Very good. Teresa?
From the NRLS point of view, we're seeing more and more landlords joining every week, which, is a positive, but it is an indication that, more and more landlords are actually seeing the reality that they need to keep up to date with what's going on. with all the changes that are happening. And, you know, there are issues out there because, you know, we're getting thousands upon thousands of calls every week. You know, it's hitting like nearly 3,000 calls every week, which we're trying to help our members as much as possible. But just looking at more of the statistics, I mean, I suppose, you know, Jenny's, you know, given her point of view of, you know, concerns with regard to tenants moving and what have you. For our landlords, we're getting a lot of landlords asking about how they deal with property repairs. So how do they go about that? How do they gain possession of property? Because, you know, antisocial behaviour incidents are on the increase. Rent arrears, you know, now that the furlough scheme has finished, there's more landlords now experience issue with tenants, you know, not being able to keep up with rent. So lots of questions like that. Just looking at our research hub though, over the last 12 months, there's 72% of landlords are actually freezing rents. So there's no rent increase there. There's only 18% of landlords increasing rent, and that could be due to the fact that the government increased the local housing allowance rate. So that might fall in line with that. And 61% of landlords are experiencing voids of under 4 weeks. So just gives a bit of a realistic feel of what is happening out there.
And just staying with you for a second, because I'm combining as a professional. I am combining 4 or 5 questions into one. There's talk about joint venture partners, but I'm going to look at this from an international perspective as well. So we all talk about people that may be coming from Hong Kong. We're seeing a lot of people coming from Hong Kong, but other countries as well, whether it's Middle East, Europe, or Americas, looking to invest in the UK. A lot of people will not know the legalese or indeed the landlord rights or the tenant rights. Teresa, from that side of things, how does the NRLA help people from the international waters?
Well, I mean, we have got educational resources, which I recommend that every landlord takes on board. So we have a landlord fundamentals course, which we do online. And that just covers all aspects of, you know, what your legal responsibilities are as a landlord in the UK. So I would, I was speaking to a landlord today who had inherited a property, and she just couldn't believe how much, you know, information there was to absorb, and was trying to think of an exit strategy. So yeah, I would definitely recommend that. And just by joining the NRLA, obviously you have access to our advice line, so you can ask, you know, any question, you know, relating to the PRS. And
I'm going to go on to Jenny in a second, but as you mentioned the word overwhelm there, let's talk about mortgage interest rates. And if you can, concisely, talk about mortgage interest rates that you can get when you're talking about an international investor coming over to the UK. And again, let's talk about whether an international person should be buying in a limited company or in their own name. And ignoring tax for a second, but from a mortgage interest rate, Simon, is there much of a difference for international investors?
Yeah, there's a small difference. So obviously you don't necessarily, well, okay, we said we wouldn't touch on tax, didn't we? You don't necessarily need to use a limited company, because potentially your tax domicile is somewhere else, potentially. So buying in your own names isn't necessarily such as a bad thing. Interest rates do sit slightly higher if you're buying in your own name. I guess they're going to sit somewhere within the 3s generally. There are a couple of lenders out there that will do it in the 2s, but they're quite restrictive in terms of the terms and conditions that they issue with the mortgages to qualify. But generally, that side of the market has remained more buoyant than I would have expected it to through the coronavirus period, to be fair.
Okay. Jenny, I know you wanted to hop in on the whole conversation about joint ventures, so here you are.
Well, I was going to take a bit more of an angle on the question, I believe, was what should you be careful about, something along those lines. I have experience of this. I've had 4 joint ventures, and I would say absolutely from day one, when you're all best of buddies, get it written up as a contract. Either if you've done it in a limited company, have a shareholders agreement, and if it's just a partnership, have a JV agreement. Go to someone like Tim, get it sorted out from day one when you all are happy with each other. Because when it's right, it's fine, and when it's not right, that's when you need the paperwork to fall back on. So, point one: definitely get a contract written up that you can rely on should things go wrong. Secondly, have very clearly defined areas of responsibility. You might have someone who's really good at sourcing, and someone else is good at financing, and someone else is good at maybe looking at how you could convert a property from what it is to what it's going to be. So know what everybody's role is, and try not to stand on each other's toes. Let people do the job you brought them in to do. You might hear me talking from experience here. I think it's really important in a joint venture to trust your partners to do the job that they're going to do, that they were brought in to do. And I mean, I would advise that have a joint venture agreement per project. Don't jump right in, get a limited company, get all the all the admin behind you, and then say we're going to do 3 or 4 projects together. Do it one at a time. Joint venture agreement per development or project, and then start another one for the next one. That way you've always got an end to it. You can have a natural end, or it can continue if that's what you choose to do, but you're not trapped by it should things go wrong. That's what I wanted to impart about that question.
I've got this sort of unwritten rule in joint ventures, which I write about in my book as well. The big thing about JVs is that you're sharing the risk here. So it's risky. It's different to if it was a loan. Now, to do that, you've got to make sure that you know this person really, really well. Even if they're good at what they do, can you trust them? And they need to do the same with you. So you need to get to know each other pretty well. And my unwritten rule is never do a JV with anyone, and in fact loan as well, that you wouldn't be prepared to come and stay at your house. Come and have dinner, stay overnight in the spare room, because I know you well enough, so I think that due diligence, you cannot beat it. You've got to know these people. I know people that have done things so quickly, gone into JVs before they've even known them. Paul.
I totally agree with you, Bronwyn. Excellent advice. So don't just, excuse the phrase, jump into bed with the first person who offers you either money or their time. You need to research them. Go on Facebook, see how involved they are in property. Don't take them on their face value. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who can talk about educators forever about the mistakes that they've made by going onto their property courses. So always check the people out first. Going back to the first question about limited companies, I've got a limited company which I set up back in 2001, but that was because of the circumstances that I set up the business. But the vast majority of my properties are all in a limited liability partnership now. So that's something I strongly advocate. Look at LLPs, but obviously take tax advice. Don't do things because of tax, do things to save yourself tax, but make sure it makes sense. So obviously speak to experts such as Simon on here. The other thing I'd say that Jenny mentioned, joint venture agreements. The thing I've got with all my I've got 3 or 4 joint venture partners, and I've got, as she said, an individual deed of trust with each property. But the other thing, because A, I'm an accountant, and B, I don't automatically trust other people automatically, or the bank accounts in my name, or the mortgages are in my name. So if they fall out with me, that's their problem. But just the other way of doing it is say, do one for you, one for me, and build a trust up that way. That way you're not interlinked. And I would always say that, which I'm sure Tim or Simon Hodgson will mention, be careful who you do financially interlink yourself with. So all my JV partners aren't financially interlinked to me, so there is nothing on my credit check which ties to that. And I would say on one of my JV partners, they've since been bankrupt. So that's a good job that I didn't. So always make sure that you keep divisions of responsibilities and divisions of the finance. So if they buy a property in their name, make sure you're protected. And similarly, if you buy it in your name, make sure they're protected. But don't get yourself mixed up. And obviously, if it's a limited company, then get a shareholders agreement. The other thing, final thing I'd like to say about limited companies is always ask the question, how are you going to get the money out? I'll leave that with you. Over to Tim. I'm sure he's got some input on this matter.
Oh, Tim, you're on mute.
I thought I'd unmuted myself. I'm back as an airline pilot. Right, there are three things basically I think we need to look at here. Firstly, as Bronwyn mentioned, trust. Trust is absolutely essential, and doing due diligence. So I think the three things I would say is, number one, you need to make sure they've got the right skill set and the right personality, and there are various ways of testing that. But you really do need to make sure you know a lot about them. Meeting them at a do and having a chat with them is all very well, but there are people out there who are simply dishonest. We've come across people changing names. We've come across people claiming to have bank accounts and property when they didn't own it, even showing people around property they didn't own. So you really got to do your due diligence. And as also was mentioned, the critical thing here is actually getting it in writing and getting a solid joint venture contract agreement. And there are a number of ways of doing it, depending how you set the joint venture up. But too many people cut corners. And I've known some quite experienced people cutting corners here and now in all sorts of trouble because they haven't got the paperwork right. Don't just rely on something downloaded offline, or your mate gave you, or someone down the pub mentioned he got a copy. Make sure it's properly drafted for your particular circumstances, because all of our circumstances are different. And if it's any help, on the group chat, I've just put up a page on our website, which is all about joint ventures. It summarizes, it's about 2,500 words, the kind of things you need to think about, the kind of questions you need to ask yourself, but particularly due diligence. In due course, we're going to put another page on the website with a great list of due diligence. It's a very important issue, and one which always people talk about, but actually very rarely actually say what due diligence actually is. And that's probably another question we can deal with sometime, but it's a lengthy one. So do your due diligence. Get it in writing and make sure you really know these people and you trust them.
Just on that point, I was just reading the YouTube live session, and one person's just asked about the question of leaving the country. It's back to you, Simon. Told you I'd get you back tonight. Of mortgage interest rates. If you become an expat, does your mortgage interest go up? Because I rather suspect if you entered an agreement for a period of time, is there a clause in the buy-to-let mortgage to say, well, you can't leave the country?
Well, within the T's and C's of every mortgage, you are expected to inform the lender of any changes of circumstance, and that also comes down to income and employment. However, we very rarely do report that back to the lender, although we're supposed to. So if you become expatriate, you are meant to tell the lender that has happened, and at which point the lender will then decide whether they want to continue as a lender with you or whether they would like you to remortgage away. There are enough lenders out there in the market space, especially in the limited company market space, where becoming an expat won't make any difference, particularly to the interest that you pay on your mortgages. The golden rule generally is that you need a tax footprint in the UK. You can help with that, Simon, obviously. That you file a tax return, okay? That you've got a UK address, a UK presence, a UK bank account, UK credit card, okay? So everything that a lender would normally see if you were still in the country. Then you can get a mortgage relatively easily, and or leave the country and come back, and it shouldn't make any difference whatsoever. If you kind of disappear off the face of the earth, no tax returns, still receiving rent income from UK properties, yeah, etc., etc., your credit file kind of disappears, then it becomes really difficult, because what you've demonstrated to a lender is that you are prepared to go, kind of under the radar, at which you are an absolute liability to lend to, for obvious reasons.
No, good answer. Good answer. A question that was posted before the session tonight from David was about property income being in one person's name, where they are high rate taxpayer and they want to use a vehicle such as a deed of trust and a Form 17 if they have things jointly owned. Now, I'm just going to talk about in the round here because that's quite a specific question, but I think it's worth talking in general. If you have got property in your own name, but you're married, it is possible to share your income if you are a high rate taxpayer or indeed a higher tax brackets than your spouse, civil partner, between your spouse and the partner. Now, with that in mind, you can do a deed of trust. Now, you could have the property 50-50, but change the percentage, say it's 1% and 99%. You could have a property whereby it's 100% in your name, but you want to split the income 50-50 because you might be them both below the basic rate tax band or below the high rate tax band into the basic rate tax band. So a deed of trust is very good. And I'm going to come on to you again in a second, Simon, but I'm going to go over to Tim now, talk about deed of trust, and which I want to talk not just a deed of trust, but the risk if a property is just in one person's name. From a family perspective, and I appreciate we're going a slightly bit off beaten track with regards to the question, but if you've got someone who owns property and they're now married, should they be doing something to protect their interests? Should they be trying to do something in regards to the protection of that house within the couple?
Well, that's a very complicated question, I think, and I'm not sure we can answer it in very quickly. But the kind of issues, I suppose,
give it a try.
Yeah. Thank you. But still, ask your accountant. That's what I'd say. Ask your accountant. No, the first thing to look at, of course, is if people are married, then generally it's joint property, certainly in terms of if they were to split up. But the first issue there is if they are married. If they're not married, then it becomes very different indeed. The non-married partner, in general terms, may have no claim at all on the property whatsoever, depending, however, if they've made contributions, and that can be quite a complicated issue. If they are in joint property, well, it's sometimes that person who, say, one person that gets into financial difficulties, say Mr. A gets into financial difficulties, then it may well be if part of the house is in his wife's name, then it may be, depending on the circumstances, that house might be safe. So it is quite a complicated issue. But broadly, yes, there may well be things to look at if one particular person is more vulnerable in terms of risk. Was that the question? Was that answer to your question, or?
It has. No, continuing though with that point, a deed of trust whereby you can allocate income from one spouse to another spouse. Is that difficult to do? How long does it take, and how much might it cost? Not putting you on the spot.
No, not being on the spot. Massive area, and I know, as we've discussed trust before, and it's such a huge area, it's very difficult to give accurate advice. But I think the first thing to think about trust is they're not some sort of wonderful magical solution to all your tax problems. The big issue with trust is once you put something into trust, the whole point is you don't have control over that asset, and that can be an issue. But in general terms, a straightforward lifetime trust can be for as little as £800 to £1,000. There are some businesses out there who do tax planning, and we know that they particularly work on the elderly, and we've seen people pay 5, 10, 15, 20 grand for a clause, just a simple clause. So you can actually get it done properly with a solicitor, but it's very much a bespoke document, and we need to look and work with your accountant in the whole of your picture. But yes, it can be a very useful part of wealth protection strategy, and it need be no more expensive than that necessarily. And just because you haven't got £500,000 or £1 million cash in the bank doesn't mean it couldn't work for you. There are many occasions when trusts, as part of an overall wealth protection policy, can work, but it's very much as part of a package which we work in with an accountant for advice.
And just keeping on that, because obviously there is something called a deed of trust, which is relatively affordable, yes. I would say, whereby you can just say, I bequeath my share of the property from one partner to another.
Sorry, yes, absolutely. No, you're quite right, and that's much more straightforward. Yes, no, you're absolutely right. So trusts are coming from quite complex structures, very bespoke, to very simple trusts in that kind of circumstance. Yes.
Yeah, Simon, go on to you. Did say I'll get you back. This is now number 4. Be prepared for number 30. In regards to mortgages, now, if one partner has got a mortgage and it's in their sole name, and then they say, well, actually, do you know what? I'm going to give 99% to my spouse who's not on the mortgage. that could breach the terms and conditions of the mortgage itself, couldn't it?
Definitely, yeah. With some lenders, that can cause some issues. Generally, they would ask for their solicitors acting on their behalf to just ascertain that it can be done and it's put in place correctly. As long as they're given the go-ahead by the solicitor, then yes, it can be done. As long as it doesn't breach T's and C's within the agreement and document. And I see that done a number of times. Yeah, to transfer of equity, gift of equity, etc.
Just continue that though again, and I'm just thinking about risk. I don't know why, but I've got risk on my brain tonight. But if one person's got the mortgage and they should happen to pass away, what would happen to the remaining spouse, because they're not on the mortgage? So how would the property continue?
Right, that obviously then goes into probate. And that is a lengthy, time-consuming, and absolutely horrible process, which I'm sure Tim would agree with. It's definitely in everyone's interest to sort that out. Have the property written down correctly. Have it in both people's name, I would suggest, for more than just that reason, but definitely for that reason. And then the whole process then becomes quite a bit less stressful and painful. You still got to go through probate, absolutely. However, the mortgage still stays in place, the lender still stays in place, the rent still comes in. And if it takes 2 years to sort out, it's not the end of the world. Where the other way around, it becomes so difficult because you've got lenders starting to apply pressure because effectively they've got a mortgage in the name of someone who's deceased. But the beneficiary, the rent, etc., is being collected by other members of the family. Yeah, so from that perspective, it's a very, very good thing to do now. More, it's not a nice thing to think of, but definitely.
And from a mortgage perspective, did you say that the other person would have to reapply in terms of if someone passes away, one spouse, the other spouse remains, even if it was written in the will, the remaining spouse has to apply? And if they're not working because it was full-time in property but now relying on property income alone, could that also provide problems?
Yeah, it can provide problems. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not unheard of to then have to go and find different lenders to which meet the criteria under which you find yourself. Whereby if you're on the mortgage already, it's not a problem, generally.
Right. Okay. Here's one for going on a different subject now. I'm hoping that was the last of the tax questions, and if it's not, I'm just going to ignore them. So the next, we're going to talk about planning now, and over to Tim, just to see if he's now arrived onto the runway. If you've got a couple of flats that was done in the 70s and 80s, but it's still on one title, or if there's no planning consent provided, we'll come on to Simon Hodgson again, that'd be number 6. But are there any issues from regards to legal, if someone's converted a property to 2 flats, no planning in place, or done vice versa? Tim, you're on mute again.
I thought I'd unmuted. My apologies. There may be. If there is no planning permission, then it's quite likely you're going to need it. And there are 2 ways around that. In very broad terms, there is a possibility sometimes of applying for what's called retrospective planning permission. In other words, planning permission after the event. There's also an alternative applying for what's called a lawful use certificate. So that may be one of the 2 options. Now, to be perfectly honest, that's a very specialist area and something we'd always work with another specialist. We go to a planner about that. But certainly it isn't something you'd ignore. And not only is there planning issues, what might cause more problems are building regulations, because really depending how it was done, it may be if the work was done without any supervision at all, someone just did it and rented it out on the quiet. Then maybe if there's no planning, possibly no building regs, and that might create even more of a problem, because while you can sometimes get to sort out planning permission, if you haven't got building regs and things aren't up to scratch, you've got a major problem. So that is the kind of thing you need to check out in advance. You should always check, never take a risk. And I would say that's an issue to talk to your solicitor, but the majority of solicitors would want to go to a specialist planner for that kind of advice. But the building regs is perhaps more of a problem depending on the circumstances.
Simon, I did say I'll come back to you on that one, because from and a jibe aside, also rhymes. What issues do you see if someone's gone into a property, it's split as two flats, and they're trying to get on one mortgage? Would there be an issue with the lenders on that side?
Yes and no. Okay, so first of all, given the fact that it's from the 70s and 80s, probably the certificate of lawful use would be the route that the solicitors are going to go down, and Tim would, kind of find out and get that proven. So generally what would have happened between then and now, the most obvious and likely thing that's happened is that there's separate council tax paid by each flat, which you can go onto the UK Gov council tax website, and you can check for various properties and check the tax and council tax and when it was paid from, and that's usually all you need to do. A lawful use certificate generally takes the same as normal planning, 8 weeks to come through. So you can do that alongside the normal conveyancing process. In terms of mortgage, there are enough lenders out there, if it's only 2 flats on one title, that won't necessarily require you to split the title. They'll just give you a normal mortgage on those 2 flats. So it's most likely, although not guaranteed, that 2 flats on one title are a house that was converted, one house, 2-story house that's been converted into 2 flats. Flat A on the ground floor, flat B on the first floor. And that's just effectively a normal mortgage on a house that just happens to be 2 flats inside it. And there's no real penalty in terms of interest rate. Once you start going above 3 flats in your own name, it gets a bit more difficult. If you put it into a limited company, you can go up to 6 flats on one title. I'm a little bit worried about Paul Hilliard. He seems to have lost his body.
Well, I was going to come on to Paul in a second. Because,
however, if he's got 2 flats on one title, then he's all right. That bit can just disappear and come back, and it's all right. We can still get him a mortgage. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to keep with you, but I'm going to move over to Paul Hilliard. Actually, the next subject we're going to talk about is service accommodation, holiday lets. I still kind of think there's something in holiday lets going forwards, as people have gone to Spain and then got stuck, or they've gone to Portugal recently and got stuck. You might want to stay in the UK going forwards. As a result of that, we'll talk about service accommodation, holiday lets, and I know Paul Hilliard's done quite a bit of that, so we'll come on to him in a second. But from your side of things, Simon, this is the 7th. It is holiday lets, mortgage interest rates for holiday lets. I mean, are they high? I mean, is there a greater risk profile for banks?
They're a little bit higher. So currently at the moment, 3.1% is the best 2-year fixed. There's some discounted variables at 2.69. This is all at 75% loan to value. They tend to be the more obscure building societies. So there's the Harpenden Building Society, the Norwich and Peterborough Building Society, the Hinckley Building Society, the Monmouthshire Building Society. But there are enough out there doing it, yeah? And they've kind of, a number of the lenders have realised that, as you point out, staycations are the way forward, and a lot of those people that have staycated have rediscovered the UK and the benefits and the beauty of the UK, and are potentially going to continue to holiday in the UK post coronavirus and any lockdown. So I think certainly demand for holiday lets is going to continue to rise and grow, which is a great thing. I was only on holiday in St Ives in August, and I was astonished how busy it was. Absolutely astonished. I go there quite regularly, and there's a normal profile of person that goes there, and you can expect to meet there, etc. It was quite different. There were people from the northeast. There were Mancunians, Liverpudlians.
Sorry, I'm not having you just skate over that point. Just what is that generalist term that you just tried to reference there?
Maybe I made that point incorrectly. In any given normal year, going on a sunshine holiday is a great thing to do. Absolutely, it's great. It's wonderful. I've enjoyed that, and quite often, the northern coast of Cornwall is surfing territory. So it's boards, it's wetsuits, it's bodyboards. You tend to find that within a normal driving radius that it tends to be a 4 or 5 hour maximum drive time to go down there, because after that you can travel abroad to Spain possibly quicker than you can drive down to Cornwall. So a lot of people didn't do it, but they have been forced to now kind of do that, and they've now realised that, okay, after a bit of a drive, wow, what an amazing place this is. So yeah, holiday is absolutely.
It's not a problem getting a holiday let mortgage then. I know this question came from Steve, and I think he was finding it difficult. Is that because maybe he hasn't got experience in that sector? I don't know.
Well, it very much depends. Obviously, we need to know Steve's background in terms of whether he's got any other buy-to-lets whatsoever.
He does. It has single lets. Yeah.
Okay, then he should have no issues whatsoever.
He needs a good broker then.
Shoddy broker, that's all I can say. Clearly not Simon in terms of helping him right now, but he will be after this one. Paul, you've got some holiday lets, haven't you? Service accommodation. I maybe talking to you some time ago about this kind of strategy. Is it something that you're ramping up now?
Most definitely. I'm particularly looking a bit like Simon, where Simon went. Devon and Cornwall are superb hotspots for holiday lets. Unfortunately, most of my holiday lets are abroad, so I'm letting to the locals at the moment in Portugal, which is different, I must say. But thank goodness for a certain booking franchise that are looking after me at the moment. Otherwise, I'd be in not very good straits as regards my overseas portfolio. But going back to the UK, yeah, excellent. Holiday lets are definitely a way to look at increasing your income, but beware. It's unless you systemize the property itself and have good local housekeeper, reliable cleaners, and you tell them how you want the place cleaned. It may sound rude, but at least then there's no debate about, look, I told you needed to wipe down the skirtings. I need you, go into detail. It's got to be in detail. Otherwise, your guests are going to be complaining, and you won't have a leg to stand on because you didn't prescribe how you wanted the property cleaned. But it's a job if you don't get it systemized and leverage other people's use. So bear that in mind. Otherwise, you're going to be very busy.
Did a whole webinar on this subject last week, hour and a half, just on holiday letting. So if anyone wants to find out a bit more, happy to share some of that. Okay.
Yeah, actually, probably if you still got the link, why don't we share that in the YouTube live now? So if you can get that, that'd be perfect. If you can get hold of that link for the recording, if you have it.
Yeah, I'll later because yeah.
Yeah, I don't put you on the spot at all. But have you talked about holiday lets with John? Is it something that you guys are pursuing?
Yeah, we've got a few holiday lets. I think what we were able to do quite cleverly was our own home. So you say your home is not an asset. Well, because we were going abroad for a while and because property's given us that freedom, we decided to holiday let our house. So we actually went to Australia for 6 months. We house sat for no cost and we made a profit on our home. So, your house could be an asset, And then I have a couple of others. Yes. So they do let well, but again, coming back to what Paul said, it is about having somebody local to manage it, somebody that can do the handover, someone that can deal with when the Wi-Fi stops or there's a problem with it. It's all about service. And if you cannot give that service and you don't get good reviews, you're not going to get good occupancy. So, but I think it's working really well, particularly now for contractors. What we're finding is contractors, even during COVID lockdown, they came to stay on our holiday lets because it was their bubble. Hotels weren't open, but also they felt that they were secure in staying in their own self-contained apartment or property. So we used to have sort of white van man come down and they were working nearby, and holiday let was fantastic. So yeah, it can work really well in different situations.
I mean, do you find, and this is a question to Paul as well, but did you find, especially with coronavirus, obviously there's self-isolating, couples now being isolated together. Did you find that husband and wife were trying to slope off to get to, a bit of freedom in one of your holiday lets at all?
Well, no, they're all been booked by contractors, but I can imagine that might be not my problem, I'm afraid,
I know that Tim was talking about there's a high rates of divorce cases going up because of people staying together. That's the only reason why I mentioned it. Jenny, from your side of things, do you get involved? Also, I appreciate you're in lettings, single lets, HMOs, but is there any advice that you can give to people thinking about doing service accommodation holiday lets?
It's not something I'm involved with. I did take a rent-to-rent on a service accommodation in the marina down in Southampton, and I JV'd that so that I had somebody who was good at marketing and bookings and all of the systems behind it, which isn't a forte for me. And having done it for a year, I decided it wasn't for me. The turnaround, which could just be a few hours, you needed to have your housekeeping, potentially your maintenance people on site, the booking in, the booking out process, the whole thing for me was all a little bit too fast. And I went back to just doing HMOs. That goes down one level. I think we go single lets, HMOs, service accommodation, as far as your input of time goes for running these properties. Because there was only one, it wasn't viable to outsource much of this. And I also like to test everything. So, I wanted to see it on the ground roots. What was it really like? It's not for me, but I think it's a very big marketplace.
That's a good point. Here's a different subject. Actually, before I do that, service accommodation holiday lets. One of the tax advantages you do have is you are able to offset the mortgage interest costs against your service accommodation holiday let. So it's unlike the single lets HMOs where Section 24 would affect you because of the restriction of the mortgage interest costs to be offset against your income. One of the other things which I really picked up on the last couple of years is the fact that if you dispose of a service accommodation holiday let, you don't have to pay CGT. And the reason for that is because you can use rollover. So if you sell one asset in an area that's no longer working and it's a holiday let, and then you buy another holiday let in a different location, you can defer the capital gains tax. So again, it's from a tax side of things, it's really awesome. There are some good things to think about. Teresa, just to finish on that, actually, from an NRLA perspective, are there any guidance on holiday lets? Because really, holiday lets have been around for a long, long time, but the way that they're being now used in terms of calling them service accommodation, great marketing, but ultimately they are holiday lets. Anything from NRLA in terms of the do's, the don'ts, and piece of the information people should be reading on?
Yeah, that's interesting. We do have different tenancy agreements. I'm not sure if we do. I'm just scouring through all our tenancy agreements. I'm not sure if we do actually do anything for holiday let currently.
I didn't expect you to NRLA to do anything specific.
We've got a company letting to a charity. No, we haven't got. We're not covering that currently.
No, fair enough. Well, talk about, holidays and going off to nice destination, Japan. Why am I talking about Japan? Japanese knotweed, of course. Talking about Japanese knotweed, Jenny, let's get straight to you. What are the issues with Japanese knotweed and why is it called Japanese knotweed?
Right, I don't know why it's called Japanese knotweed, but you just want to have nothing to do with it. If you've got a property that has Japanese knotweed, and I know the question came from someone whose next door neighbour has got it, which is really unfortunate. For starters, don't buy it. If you're getting down it, don't buy it. If you've got it and you've got Japanese knotweed, you need a professional to get a program in place. It might even come down to concrete in your yard. It just grows and grows and grows. Like bamboo grows so quickly. Yeah, Japanese knotweed does the same, and it runs underneath and then it sprouts again. You might think you've got it, you haven't. It needs a specialist contractor and a long time to clear it. It will destroy your house. It will get into the bricks and mortar, which is why mortgage companies are very keen to know whether there's Japanese knotweed around. If you come across a property that's got it, it needs to be very cheap if you're going to buy it, because you're going to have some expense. That's That's all I can say on Japanese knotweed. Stay away from it if you have the opportunity.
It is reportable. I assume it's come from Japan. It certainly isn't a native plant, but you have to report it because it needs to be monitored across the UK. We do have it in Southampton, and I do have a bit of experience of this. But if you can tackle it quickly with an expert, they will give you a guarantee. They will give you a certificate that you can then use for the mortgage. If it's next door, that's tricky, isn't it? Because it's likely to spread, and that's the problem with it. So, you know, if somebody's wanting to buy and you know it's next door, is there anything else they can do, especially if the next door people are not sharing whether they're tackling it or not? I don't know. Paul, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I've had some experience. I understand where Jenny's coming from, but I would say that to get a professional in, you're only going to be spending, I say only, 10 to 15,000 pounds to treat it. So if you can get a much bigger discount, 25, 30,000, then you're going to be in the driving seat. So don't be totally afraid, but make sure you're not paying over the top for it, is what I would recommend. And yes, it is Japanese, and good old Victorians imported it because it was a fast-growing, lovely plant. Don't think so, unfortunately.
Simon, there is a mortgage issue, isn't there, in terms of even if there's a history of Japanese knotweed on a property?
Definitely challenges. So from memory, Japanese knotweed was brought over by the Victorians, used predominantly to shore up railway cuttings and what have you, and it spread massively from there, and creates havoc. You know, the roots themselves can grow through concrete, all sorts of things. It is an absolute nightmare to get rid of. So typically mortgage lenders want to look at certain things. The first they want to know is the distance of the infestation compared to the property that they are lending against. There are some boundaries. So typically 7 meters is their comfort zone. Inside of 7 meters, it gets an awful lot more difficult to deal with, and the treatment plan needs to be far more inclusive. If you've got knotweed in a neighbouring property, you absolutely have to get a treatment plan to cover the neighbouring property, and you need to get the other owners on board, even if you decide to pay for it. So from where Paul's coming from, yeah, you can get around it, and the trick would be to pay for the treatment plan yourself, get the neighbouring properties permission for that treatment plan to take place. And why wouldn't they? Because it's going to shore up and increase the value of their property massively. And then you can get it done. If the knotweed is within 3 meters and actually within 2 meters, it can be almost impossible to get a mortgage. So from that perspective, quite often what has to happen, you have to buy cash, have the treatment plan, and have the treatment plan in place for a number of years, and have a certificate issued to confirm that it has gone from that boundary and it's no longer there, and then mortgages can then be reinstated.
No, that's a good point. It's a good point. A couple of things for anyone listening right now. Hopefully, we've just gone past the hour mark by just about 3 minutes. It's great to have you all on board. Make sure that you do press that like button. That really does help us with the YouTube algorithm, sharing this meaningful content. I'm sure you agree with everyone else who's listening in. But also, don't forget to use the comments box, because if you do have questions, even if you're finding it useful, say great point, then put that. If you like what Bronwyn's saying, Jenny and all the rest of the team, put, really thankful, useful information. If you've got mortgage questions, slam them all in. Just get them straight in. Don't hesitate. Get as many mortgage questions in as possible. That'd be greatly appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well. There was a question in regards to holiday lets and capital allowances. And I'm going to cover that with VAT, where I said that there was a benefit from for Section 24, mortgage interest relief cap doesn't affect holiday lets. There is something called capital allowances as well. And I'm not going to go into too much, but we recommend a company called Six Forward. They do a capital allowances report on a service accommodation holiday let, and it's basically the plant machinery in the property. So things that can fall to the ground if you tipped it upside down. that plant and machinery can be valued for capital allowance purposes, and you get a huge cost tax reduction. Typically, someone would say that you can get a capital allowance report of 20 to 30% of the value of the building for a service accommodation holiday lets, and that cost for first year allowance could be offset immediately against your income. And now the thing about capital allowance report versus yourself doing a survey is the fact that they can see behind the wall. So the heating systems, the watering systems, and electricity systems as well. They can do all the valuations of that entire building, and you can only really see what's in front of you. So from that side, it's worth noting. The one other thing about service accommodation holiday lets is VAT. Once you go over 85,000 pounds, you have to become VAT registered, which does then bring a question into being anti-competitive, because you're having to add this 20% VAT markup on your pricing. I'm going to go over to you, Paul, because that's always been a fascinating. I've never really spoke to you about this particular subject. So, are your holiday lets registered, VAT registered, and if so, what have you done about being competitive?
Definitely not VAT registered, because I'm able to keep them all underneath the threshold. So if you careful enough and careful enough in your planning, then you just make sure that doesn't happen. I was going to pass it back to you and say, what advice would you give to other people to avoid it? I mean, I've got some of my service accommodation units in my limited company, and also in my personal name, and JV partners. So that's how we're able to split the risk of losing 20% of the income. Yeah,
you do have to be a bit careful with that, because VAT, the way that they do it nowadays is the vatable person is the individual. So sometimes, irrespective if they've got limited companies or properties of their own name, it's called income splitting. And HMRC have said, well, we realize people do that, so we're now going to say that that property portfolio belongs to that person. Now, if you've got JVs, that's slightly different, actually, because that is a business entity in its own right. But if you're using properties just in that you own only in your own name, and then you're siphoning off more properties inside a limited company, which is different to what Paul just mentioned, what the HMRC will do is add the total income from that, and then say, well, if that's over £85,000, then you need to be VAT registered. I would agree with Paul. It's better to look at ways of minimizing your income from a turnover perspective, but go for margin. So if you get into that stage of £85,000, maybe rather than expanding, look for margin growth instead. The other side, if you have to become VAT registered, typically I would say if it's £85,000, you really got to step up to £120,000 to make up the difference of margin that you lose because of VAT. So it's very important for you to understand how that all works.
Simon, Steve asked about VAT, but not for holiday lets. He asked about his limit.
Yeah, I've got this right on it, actually, Bron. That's why it made me lead onto it. And the thing about that is you can't claim back VAT. It's rental income is VAT exempt. So pick it up on the refurbishment, and you are spending a lot of money on VAT. Unfortunately, you can't claim back VAT if you're doing single lets or HMOs. Now, you could do it, and that's why I was waiting actually for that moment, because if you're doing holiday lets and you've got a big refurbishment, then you can claim back VAT, but that does also mean that you're going to be charging out VAT. So giveth in one hand and taketh with another from a HMRC perspective. So VAT's always been one of those of, it's never nice, but it's one of those things you just have to accept. So hopefully that covers that one, Bronwyn. Now, in terms of one of the things that I picked up here was a question, and Monsieur asked about an extension. I would really want to pick up on that one, whereby someone's And capital gains tax, this is really pertinent actually. Capital gains tax now has to be reported within 30 days of completion of an asset, which is, you still have to report it on your self-assessment tax return, but you now have to report it. And it really does put the onus on you, this person selling the property, to identify all of your receipts, which is come in terms of your purchase cost and any extensions. And you need to really have the VAT receipts from your tradesperson that's been supplied to you. And if you don't have that receipt, then you can't really offset the cost. Now, I've already seen people that have gone into this state of fear because of this 30-day reporting requirement, and they've seen a deadline and they felt that they've got to really hit that deadline, and therefore they just completely forget that they've done an extension and they lose out a tax relief on £20,000–30,000 worth of costs. So please, if you are doing any extensions, make sure that you keep your receipts. Use something, whether it's QuickBooks or Xero, to register that cost of acquisition as a fixed asset capital cost and store it somewhere. So when you do come to sell that property, that you can get the tax relief on any capital gains. Because there are too many people that are, when the property increases in value, they are paying far more tax than they need to, because they completely forget to offset some of their costs. And I'm going to bring back the, and I purposely delayed my answer to the other question of deed of trust, because we talked about earlier about deed of trust and saying, well, can we do some income splitting between spouses? Well, absolutely. But what about capital gains tax as well? Because you've got to think that each individual within a couple arrangement can get a capital gains tax annual allowance of £12,300. So why not, if you've got property that's in your name that you're looking to sell, well, why not think of a percentage split that utilizes the other person's CGT annual allowance? And if they are a basic rate taxpayer and you're a high rate taxpayer, try and calculate the exact percentage of ownership. We've got a spreadsheet tool that does all that. We've got a couple of videos on there as well to really help you to understand how to minimize CGT. So it brings both of those points on in terms of CGT, don't forget your receipts, and more importantly, when you're doing a property split, so you can do a deed of trust even a day or a week before the property is sold. So do bear that in mind. Tim, I know that you've been a bit quiet. Hopefully now you've come into the cargo bay, picked up your luggage and are ready to go with the next answer. But we're talking about the someone who is buying a property for the first time purchase. And this is a buy-to-let property. And this is interesting because we've been speaking about people, again, coming from Hong Kong over to the UK. And they buy a buy-to-let property investment, and then they come into the UK to buy a home. I mean, from your perspective, there is straight away be a stamp duty land tax liability of the 3% surcharge. Are you seeing people kind of stumble into property by accident, buy a buy-to-let property in their own name, and they go, oh no, I want to buy my own home, but I've got to pay the 3% SDRT high rate now?
I don't know.
Fair enough.
Basically, as you know, I don't run the cases and I don't know. It sounds logical, and I'll happily ask one of my team. You know, we deal with 1,300 transactions a year, conveyancing transactions, but I don't deal with any of them. In fact, I've never been a conveyancer. Between me and you, how I passed my conveyancing exams, I do not know. But that was about 35 years ago, so we'll forget about that. So I don't know, to be honest, Simon, but I would imagine, you know, it would be an issue, but I'm guessing there, but my team would know.
I know there were several people that I've been working with who sort of, they don't own their own home, but they've got a buy-to-let already. No, they're going to buy a buy-to-let. And then the next one, they go, oh, that's still okay. I don't have to pay the additional. And of course you do, because it's about the second property. So so no matter whether it's your own home or not, if it's a second property you're going to be buying, then you will have the 3% additional stamp duty to pay. So forget the mortgage, the stamp duty holiday. This is about the additional 3%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And don't forget that applies whether it's a second own your own property. So if you've got your own property that you're trying to sell and you buy and complete on another, then you're going to incur the extra 3% stamp duty. So even though there's a stamp duty holiday at the moment until the end of March, you will still have to pay the 3%. But as long as you sell your first home within 3 years, you can claim it back. So.
And I think that's one of the questions that's just come up, funny enough, is I'm just going to read Valimia being saying, being an expat, apologies if I completely got that wrong, but being an expat in the EU country with a salaried income being there, so obviously in Europe, salaries over there, wanting to buy a property, the question is, should I buy my own personal name or a limited company? And I think that's a very good question. In terms of tax structure, what you have to realize, if you're in the EU, by the way, and we don't know what Brexit's going to do for tax changes, because there's going to be quite a few. Right now, if you are in the EU membership, you can you can get a personal allowance of £12,500 worth of income in the UK, which will be tax-free. Now, if you use a limited company structure, you don't get the 12,500 tax-free allowance. So sometimes you could be disadvantaged by using a limited company, not just the fact that you've got a higher interest rate. Now, forgive me, but we don't know what Brexit will do regards to tax. And if you're a member of the European Economic Order area, then could you be subject to the loss of that 12,500? Don't know. Someone's asked a question, Daniel's answered a question about the 30-day reporting. The fact that you've got to do the 30-day reporting, anyone making a disposal, you clearly have to submit that to HMRC. You have to meet the payment of capital gains tax. But by the way, you still have to put it on your self-assessment at the end of the year. And the reason for that is because sometimes you might have a salary of £30,000. And if you've got a capital gains tax of, let's say, £50,000, you'll be straddling the basic rate tax band and the high rate tax band. But how much will you straddle that? Well, that's a great question. So you won't be 100% accurate with your capital gains tax calculation. And your self-assessment is almost like a mop-up to say, have you underpaid tax or have you overpaid tax? And then you make that adjustment on self-assessment tax returns. So HMRC haven't made it easy because they haven't baselined the CDT at a 1% or 1% level. That probably gives them now an opportunity to start thinking about, well, how do we look at capital gains tax, and how should we have 1% line? Don't know. Now, someone's asked the question, do you need to do CGT reporting if you've done it in a limited company? Well, CGT reporting is a self-assessment. If you've got capital gains because you sold property inside a limited company, there isn't that much more of a reporting requirement because it's going to be done on your tax return for company, not you as an individual. So hopefully that's covered that off. Someone's asked a question, and I think it's just worth, we haven't really talked about the property strategy, but let's bring you all on board now. And we'll start with Bronwyn, go over to Jenny, and then Teresa. Property strategy going forwards, where are the biggest opportunities? We've seen so much change with the economy in terms of sociological changes that's going on. Where do you, Bronwyn, let's start with you. Where do you think the biggest opportunities are post-COVID situation?
Well, it's about getting the best education you can so you understand the risks of the different strategies. It's about sourcing properties from motivated sellers and really adhering to the 5 golden rules, which in my book is chapter 5. It's so important to buy from motivated sellers, and there are plenty of them out there. Post-COVID, there's a very interesting market. So I know there's a mini boom, but there's definitely people that want to be selling their houses fairly quickly. So there's opportunity out there. So I would say, if you're starting out, then you can't beat the buy to lets, the straightforward initial purchase. HMOs are doing really well at the moment because people are, perhaps leaving their family home for some reason. I have a house in Portsmouth which is pretty much all divorcees. It's just one of those things. They all happen to be living together now, so that's really interesting. I've also got council using my HMOs because there's a lot of people who've been displaced during COVID and they haven't got accommodation for them. So they're actually paying very good rates into HMOs. So for me, HMOs give the best cash flow, and it works really well if you get a fantastic agent like Jenny. Over to Jenny.
Thank you, Bronwyn. I live in Southampton. It's a university town, while we straddle Southampton and Portsmouth. In both of those areas, there's been a really, really, really big build of student accommodation, and the sort of fallout from that is that there are a lot of student landlords who are needing to get out of the of that marketplace. So there are a lot of, I would say, motivated sellers of licensed properties that probably are in pretty poor condition. Certainly the ones that I've been aware of have been messed about rather, but could be, with a little bit of money, made into nice professional HMOs. There are a lot of them out there, so there's definitely an opportunity to buy at a good price. Most of them have got licenses, potentially not quite a full license that you would need to run a professional HMO, but the fact that they've got a license, you could probably get that license upgraded to with some amendments to the house to a full license for HMOs on individual tenancies. But I would say that is a very good area if you're, as Bronwyn said, if you just wanted to get started. Single lets are good because they're easy. HMOs are much better cash flow, and there's plenty of people out there getting rid of HMOs, and particularly student HMOs. So if you've got a university town, probably the same thing is happening in every university town, and that might be an opportunity for people. Certainly that's what we're looking at here, with people who are looking to invest, those ex-student properties really. Can I go back to a question that we had earlier about the title split? Can I do that? What I think about that situation, apart from all the legal stuff that everyone's spoken about, is it's a great opportunity to add value. If you're buying something that hasn't got all the planning permissions and anything else, and you're buying it at the right price, whether it's on mortgage or not, do the proper split, get the utilities split, do the whole thing, get a freehold on it, get 2 leaseholds on it. It'll be worth a lot more money then. And also you could potentially sell one, keep the other, and so get, almost a no money left in deal by the time you've done that process. So I think that's a great opportunity. I also like looking for things that have got short leases on them, because it's an easy job. Extend the lease, make sure you know what you're doing, but extend the lease, it adds value, and then sell it on or keep it in your portfolio, whatever strategy you're trying to follow. But those are, I would say, relatively low risk and relatively easy to do if you're newish. Don't want to get into doing commercial conversions and those kinds of things until you've cut your teeth on some other stuff.
And the expert in this room is Tim on short leases. So there we are.
Indeed.
That's another webinar to do, isn't it, Tim? Who else?
Did you want me to come in on that?
Please do.
Yeah, it's really nice to actually hear someone talk about short leases, because people, it seems to be one of the secrets of the property community. No one ever mentions it. Just to make sure that people understand, if you've got a lease that was originally granted for over 21 years, and we're talking about what been traditionally usually 99 or 125-year leases, obviously that creeps down. Now, I was born in 1962, so as far as I'm concerned, 1970 is quite a recent flat, but it's not. It's 50 years ago. So it was bought with a 99-year lease and built in 1970. It'll have 49 years left. I'm sure Simon will confirm it'll be impossible to get a mortgage on that, and so therefore it becomes a cash buyer, and as a result you can get some real bargains. Now, Unfortunately, a lot of agents don't understand that, and they'll put the price up far too high, but it's not going to sell. So provided you're prepared to do the numbers game and be patient, short lease properties can be a real bargain. All you need, however, is a solicitor and a surveyor who really understand it, because it's a niche area, and I have 5 people, that's all they do, and we're always happy to answer questions. So I'm delighted to actually hear someone mentions that, because no one ever does. It's one of the hidden strategies that no one understands, and it's a bargain. There you go.
Tim, just keep it with you on that one. Isn't there an SDLT saving as well, because you've got at least less than 21 years?
I guess there would be. It's never come up, I must admit, not for me, because, as you know, I don't do the conveyancing myself, but logically, I guess it would be. Yeah. You buy it cheaper and then you extend the lease. Yeah. Another bonus.
Simon Hodgson, just talk about that one. Anything on mortgages?
Yeah, so kind of dovetailing with.
We can all do this now to you, Simon. That's not FA Cup ears, by the way.
So dovetailing what Tim was saying, typically if it dips below 49 years, it becomes really hard to do. There are a few bridging lenders out there that will do it, but they do it with a bit of resistance. There are a few mortgage lenders, however, that if you've got a mortgage, a lease within the 50-year brackets, let's say it's 58 years, they'll do a 7-year term, so you can buy it on a no early redemption charge mortgage and get the lease extended and then remortgage it without having to pay fees to get back out. So it really kind of fits quite sweetly. And I've had that a number of times where people have rung me up to ask, say, oh, crikey, I'm going to have to get a bridge. And I surprise them by going, no, we can do a mortgage on that. Yeah.
We've got 5 minutes left. I want to talk about one particular subject, the Green Deal, or whatever the terminology is nowadays. Obviously, the government made some sort of, just try and check on my phone, in the budgets, this mini budget, summer money budget, whatever you call it, they talked about doing this kind of incentive for people doing up their property to get up to £5,000 or £10,000. Have you guys ever seen that again? It feels like it, for me, it raised its head in terms of being able to provide a grant to people to do up their properties, and it was applicable for landlords as well. But it seems to have gone on deaf ears. I don't know, maybe Paul Hilliard, from your perspective with LMPG, if that was to be something kicking off, you guys would be advertising it straight away, not, to help people reduce their refurbishment costs. Have you heard anything about this deal grant thing that's been going around?
Yeah, we did actually do a webinar on it last Wednesday with Wolsey about air source and ground source heat pumps. So it's available on the LMPG website if you want to go and have a look at that. So it's called the Green Homes Deal project, rather, and the danger is that it's owner occupiers or the private rented sector can access it. But the danger is you're not going to get any return on it because the benefit is going to be for your tenants. So just be careful spending out £2,000 or £3,000 on doing that. It is a grant for, they split it into two parts. One is a primary and one is a secondary part of the project. First part is the main installation. So anything, insulating, so cavity wall, loft insulation, even topping up. However much you spend on that primary, including air source pumps as well, if you spend £2,000 on a project to do that, then you can spend £2,000 improving, say, replacing a back door, or which has only got single glazing, or replacing single glazing with double glazing. But you can only spend up to claim £2,000 of that. And it's 2/3 of the project you're able to claim. So it should have come in on the 1st September. It's now going to come in, allegedly, people are saying it's going to come in at the end of September. But there are government websites which explain to you what you're entitled to claim and what you're not entitled to claim. And there's an eligibility calculator on there. So go away and have a look at that. But you are talking somewhere like, I'd say around £2,000 to put a ground source or heat source in. And be careful if you go on, have a look at the webinar, because we explain the difference between if it's a split up unit, then that means you have to have a F-gas engineer to install it, and the F-gas engineer has to buy the product. So you can't go out and source it through LNPG. You have to buy the product, and therefore there's no saving there. But if you have it as one combined unit, you can then put that in like type of air conditioning unit almost. You can then put that into your properties and improve your EPC, which is obviously important. Just zipping back to strategy, one thing that nobody mentioned is permitted developments. Also at the 1st September, permitted development classes were all changed, and it means now that for properties between 1948 and 2018, I think it was, if you've got a property in that build timescale, you can actually put 2 layers, whether that's a mid-terrace. If you really want to be daft and do that, you can do that without planning permission. So 2 levels on a terrace, 2 levels on a semi might be a bit more difficult because you're going to have to complicate things with now, but certainly on a detached house inside those. So don't think you can go and do it to a Victorian or Georgian property, but that's a great opportunity. And certainly if you haven't got the experience, then joint venture with somebody like who's got experience, like myself. But also, if you're looking at HMOs, make sure that if you're in an Article 4 area, that the property that's going to be at HMO has got an Article 4 HMO license already. Otherwise, you're going to have to get planning permission. So I hope that explains a bit about Green Homes project. Perfect.
Well, listen, I'm about to rip up my application for the beat because we've gone over time. And I want to make sure that I go over to Bronwyn for a summary. But it's great to talk about permitted development, because if Tim's kept his first home purchase back in 1940s, then he'll be able to do some permitted development. So Tim, there's a bit more good news for you. Bronwyn, over to you to summarise from tonight's session.
Yes, thank you. As ever, the time disappears. We had over 99 people, I think, register for this event, and we had quite a lot of questions. So I think we've covered pretty much all of them. So well done, everybody. It's really, really good to have everybody here. And the conclusion really is, we don't have all the answers for everything, but we know somebody who does. And I think this group here, even if we don't have the answer, we know where to find it. But I think you will have found today, look at the expertise that you've got in this room. So, do contact us individually. If there's something we mentioned and you didn't quite get it, come back to us, ask us more questions. That's the beauty of this group. And I just want to highlight that I've been running the spotlight on the expert sessions. So in between the first Monday of every month, I pick one of the experts. So we've already done tax, we've done mortgages, we've done lettings with Jenny the other week. So the next one, drum roll, is Tim. So it's the spotlight on the legal aspects, and really it's the 9 legal mistakes to avoid. Now, when you say it like that, you start to think, oh, I've got to watch that. I've got to find out what are those mistakes I've got to avoid. So the 21st, Monday the 21st, a couple of weeks' time, we're going to have a whole hour with Tim. He's going to be presenting those mistakes to avoid and also answering your questions. So if you've got any legal complexity, the more complex the better, send it over and I'll make sure that Tim's aware of that. And yeah, there is Tim now. So he'll have his sort of pilot seat and his pilot microphone on again, so we can take the mickey of him directly. So yeah, but thank you, Simon. It's been brilliant. Thank you for hosting this today, as ever. And yes, we overran, but that's fine. We talk too much now, don't we?
Simon does. Oh, sorry. I mean, did I say that out loud? Wow. Anyway, so the next session is Monday, the 5th of October. So Bronwyn and I will be sending out notifications amongst all the panel members. So expect to see that email coming out to you shortly. But for your diaries, please make sure that the 5th of October, 2020 at 7 p.m. is in your diary, so you can be joining for the next session. And from me and all the rest of the panel members, thank you ever so much for joining us, and we'll see you again in a month's time.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
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 Okay.